To call the April 22nd, 2021 Big Cypress Basin Board meeting to order. Good afternoon. If those in the room could please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Well, we really appreciate everyone joining us on this Earth Day for this public meeting via Zoom. I miss seeing everyone in the room, but we're getting closer, and I'm thankful until then that we can conduct our meetings safely and continue to address Basin business via Zoom. You will notice some of the board members and presenters are here in person at the Collier County Board of County Commissioners Chambers. We're complying with district and Collier County standards on social distancing and safety. And all board business being conducted today is live streamed via Zoom for interaction with the board. Today's meeting is also being played on Collier TV and the district's website. Most of you who have joined us via Zoom over these last few months know how this works. But for those who are joining us for the first time, welcome. And here are some things you should know. Members of the public who wish to speak may use the raise the hand feature on Zoom. And if members of the public are having trouble and need help, please go to our website, sfwmd.gov, and click the orange Ask Us button at the top of the page. If you are using a phone and would like to comment, please press *9 to raise your hand and *6 to mute and unmute your phone. Board members in the room, I would ask you to please speak up and speak close to the mic so everyone can hear you. And Mr. Hill is joining us via Zoom today. And Andy, if you'll use the raise the hand feature to join in the conversation, I'll make sure to recognize you. Agenda revisions. Lisa, are there any agenda revisions today?
You have no revisions today.
Great, thank you so much. How about abstentions by the board members for items on the agenda? I'm going to call each one of you for abstentions or disclosures on the agenda. Vice Chair Waters?
No abstentions.
Mr. Hill?
No changes.
Ms. Rivera?
Nothing to add.
Okay, and I do not have any either. So the next item is the approval of the minutes of our February 25th, 2021 Basin Board meeting. I'd like a motion, please, and a second to approve the February 25th minutes.
I'll make the motion to approve the minutes, Madam Chair, for the February 25th meeting.
And I'll second.
Great, thank you so much. Motion by Vice Chair Waters, second by Ms. Rivera. And we'll go ahead and conduct a vote on this. Vice Chair Waters?
Yes.
Mr. Hill?
Yes.
Ms. Rivera?
Yes.
And I vote yes. So that the minutes are approved 4-0. The next item on the agenda is general public comment. Members of the public, if you would like to speak on any item not on the agenda today, you may use the raise the hand feature in Zoom. And if you are using a phone and would like to comment, please press *9 to raise your hand and *6 to mute or unmute yourself. The 3-minute guideline will apply. Aaron, is there anyone who would like to speak to the board from the public?
Madam Chair? Madam Chair?
Yeah, I can hear you, just a little louder.
Madam Chair, there are no public comments at this time.
Okay. All right, we'll move on. There's another public comment period at the end of the meeting as well. So the first item on our agenda is the Collier County Water Quality Update. Our first presenter is Rhonda Watkins with Collier County Pollution Control and Prevention. Good afternoon, Rhonda. Thanks for joining us today.
Good afternoon, board members. For the record, Rhonda Watkins, Collier County Pollution Control. Happy Earth Day and happy Water Conservation Month. I brought all the board members an irrigation calibration tool. in celebration of Water Conservation Month.
Well, how nice of you. Thank you so
You're
much.
welcome. I left those with Lisa, so she has them. She can hand them out. If you already have one, give it to a neighbor who doesn't, and let them check their own irrigation. All right. Thank you for inviting me today to speak to you. And let's go ahead and get started. Since there are a couple new faces, although I can't see one of them on the board, since the last time I presented, let me give you a little background on who we are. We have our own in-house laboratory, and they are certified to analyze over 75 different analytes. We also have the first nationally certified government field sampling program in the state. Not to brag, but even DEP and South Florida Water Management District haven't gotten this certification yet. We do all follow the same SOPs that DEP has set forth, but this certification just gives us a little bit better level of confidence on our data. Sorry about that. I didn't forward this slide. We do have 20 years of sampling analysis in pollution control, and we also sample and analyze for external clients, including City of Naples. We analyze Pelican Bay and coastal zone management. Pollution control has been in partnership with the Big Cypress Basin since 1998 and been involved in projects like Picayune restoration, pre and post-construction monitoring, Immokalee Stormwater Master Plan development, and Lake Trafford restoration. Over the years, locations and priorities have changed, but we maintain a cooperative program sharing surface water and groundwater data that is used to monitor trends, evaluate water quality, and track project outcomes. All of this data we collect is ultimately used to make management decisions and prioritize project funding by the basin and the county. The surface water monitoring network is designed with trend monitoring in mind. We have a network of 54 sites. 17 of those sites are funded by the basin that we have sampled since 1998. Prior to the basin partnership, our sampling efforts were concentrated in only a few basins a year, with samples only collected quarterly. Being able to sample such an extensive network monthly provides better data for long-term trend analysis and quarterly samples. In addition to our trend network, BCB helps fund 5 sites in the Lake Trafford watershed to monitor long-term recovery of the lake post-dredging, and also to monitor effectiveness of various management measures being taken in the lake, like aquatic vegetation restoration, shoreline management, enhancement, and integrated aquatic plant management. These are the surface water parameters that we analyze monthly. All of this data is uploaded and available to the public through the Florida Department of Environmental Protection's Watershed Information Network Database, also known as WIN. Data collected prior to June 2017 were also uploaded to the old database called Storette, which is still publicly available. The basin helps fund the groundwater monitoring program, and we have a network of 50 wells covering 4 aquifers. Some wells are owned by South Florida Water Management District, some wells are owned by U.S. Geological Survey, and some are owned by Collier County. Since groundwater quality doesn't change as rapidly as surface water, we only monitor these wells twice a year, once during the wet season and once during the dry season. These data are also available in the DEP's WIN and Storette databases. But today I'm going to talk about the surface water. Wow, what a year. Is it over yet? It doesn't feel like it. Anyway, we had our challenges with COVID, including lab shutdowns, working from remote locations, and even simple things like getting gloves and chemicals to decon our equipment was an issue. Our field teams had to work in remote locations to prep and deploy for the field, since our laboratory is located in the Department of Health building, which was COVID-0 for quite some time. We were also shipping samples to a university for sucralose analysis, but the university was shut down and they couldn't get into their lab until mid to late summer. Because we didn't get sucralose data until late, I'm not prepared to talk about that today. I'll just say we are using it to track wastewater in the waterways, and fiscal year 20 was the first time we've ever analyzed it. I'd be happy to come back and discuss that at a later date once I've had time to look at the data. Anyway, as bad as 2020 was, we only missed 1 sample and 1 analysis. I was very impressed with our lab staff and our field crews. they were able to keep up our level of service that we had been doing for years. And if there was any bright side to 2020, it's that we didn't have any hurricanes. Thank God. So now, because two of you are new to the board, you missed my amazing presentation on impaired waters and total maximum daily loads. I'm sure Mr. Waters and Madam Chair Roman are still talking about it, but let me catch you up a bit. DEP takes data from those two databases that I mentioned, and they do this huge assessment of surface water quality. This assessment is called the Impaired Waters Rule Assessment. It's done on a 5-year rotating schedule throughout Florida. The last time it was done in Collier County was 2019. So the map you see here represents the water body boundaries defined by DEP that they use in their assessment. These water body boundaries on the map represent the watershed or the drainage area so each watershed is assessed based on the water quality samples taken within that boundary. DEP then determines if water quality is in the watershed is meeting state water quality standards based on its designated use. The designated use of a watershed could be recreational, like boating, swimming, or it could be shellfish harvesting, or it could be used for drinking water. If you look at the coastal water bodies in Collier County, most of those are class 2 for shellfish harvesting. So they have a little bit more stringent water quality standards than our inland basins or watersheds, which are mostly class 3 recreational for swimming, boating, and fishing. Each of these designated uses has different water quality standards. If a water body is not meeting the standards for its designated use, it's deemed impaired. So from our last assessment in 2019, 21 of the water bodies in Collier County were declared impaired, meaning they weren't meeting their designated use. Each water body can be impaired for more than one parameter. So in 2019, 21 water bodies had 48 impairments. To give you an example, the Silver Strand, that big green one sitting out there by itself, that only has one impairment for iron. But if you go look at an inland basin like Rock Creek near the airport, that one actually has 3 different impairments for copper, bacteria, and iron. So that's where that 48 number comes, even though there's only 21 impaired waters. After a water body is declared impaired, DEP then can set limits within the water body, limiting the amount of specific parameter that can be discharged to that water body. This is called a total maximum daily load, or TMDL. The point of this slide was to show you where and what our water quality issues are. If you have more questions about the impaired waters assessment and total maximum daily loads, I'd be more than happy to walk you through it offline. It just gets a little detailed in this situation. As I mentioned, this assessment is done by DEP every 5 years, but DEP is actually discussing doing this every 2 years now to give people a better indication of what the water quality is and not having to wait 5 years to find out where the problems are and where we need to fix them. Now let's look at water quality in 2020. I'm not going to try and duplicate the impaired waters assessment that DEP just did in 2019, but I do want to give you a snapshot of what the data looked like in 2020. To do that, I use the same water quality standards that DEP uses for Florida Administrative Code 62-302. I should note that applying these criteria aren't as simple as looking at a result and saying it's above or below a standard. In many cases, the standard is a complex formula using more than one parameter. For instance, to determine if an ammonia result has exceeded a standard, you must have also collected temperature and pH at the same time. Some standards are based on a criteria that shouldn't be exceeded more than once in a 3-year period, based on the annual geometric mean. Are you confused yet? Good. I'm just trying to make the point that trying to determine whether a result or an entire water body is not meeting standards is not an easy process. So now to nutrients, nitrogen and phosphorus. The most talked about pollutant in Florida waterways in the last 5 years. For a long time, the state of Florida never had nutrient criteria that were based on a number, the number not to exceed. Instead, it was a narrative criteria that just said nutrients shouldn't cause an imbalance of flora or fauna. But that's pretty hard to assess, and it's even harder to regulate. So around 2013, DEP finally established numeric nutrient criteria, specific numbers that shouldn't be exceeded for nitrogen and phosphorus. These nitrogen and phosphorus standards were developed for all the estuaries, streams, and lakes, including Lake Trafford. In some cases, like Gordon River Extension, where there's a TMDL, those nitrogen and phosphorus limits are established in that TMDL. But here's the big gap. We currently have no numeric nutrient criteria in the canals for South Florida. We still have that old narrative criteria that says they shouldn't cause an imbalance. So if there's no standards for nitrogen and phosphorus in canals in South Florida, how do we know if nutrient levels are bad or not? How can we assess the two parameters that are causing the most concern statewide, nitrogen and phosphorus? Well, for the sake of comparison, I use the next nearest nitrogen and phosphorus standards. I use the peninsular nutrient standards covering the purple area you see in this map, which kind of looks more blue today. It's the same nutrient standards that Lee County to our north has to meet in their streams and rivers. I needed some number to be able to screen the data we have. So in the absence of actual numeric nutrient criteria in our canals, I use the next closest things. There are no standards for chlorophyll in the canals, but DEP uses chlorophyll, which is a plant pigment, to measure algal growth in water. So I'm using it here as a screening tool to measure that imbalance of flora that I talked about. So for the next couple slides, when you see total nitrogen, total phosphorus, or chlorophyll exceedances, they are not true exceedances of a state standard because we don't have any standards for those parameters. The only place those are going to be true exceedances are going to be Lake Trafford and the estuaries, which I'm not talking about, and Gordon River. So this table shows the percent of samples that exceeded a standard or a screening limit during 2020. For instance, 34.5% of all the dissolved oxygen readings that we took in the county in 2020 exceeded this state criteria. It was our most exceeded parameter. This is likely because we have very slow, dark, warm canals that are heavily influenced by groundwater. Our dissolved oxygen in our canals are naturally low because of this. So we keep seeing those continued dissolved oxygen exceedances. But overall, the table also shows that some of the parameters had seasonal variation. So E. coli bacteria, nutrients, and chlorophyll, you'll see a difference between wet and dry season. There were more exceedances in the dry season. This is likely because all of that is concentrated in the canal because they just become long lakes in the dry season. They're not really flowing. And then in the wet season, those concentrations can be diluted with rainwater coming in. This graph gives you a good overall summary of the water quality for 2020. From highest to lowest, it shows you the percentage of exceedances in the water body and which parameters are most often exceeded. You will notice that Lake Trafford had the highest percentage of samples collected that exceeded a standard. And because there are numeric nutrient criteria for Lake Trafford, these are real exceedances. I should note that Lake Trafford nitrogen and phosphorus criteria are lower than the screening criteria that I used from the peninsular region. If we had numeric nutrient criteria in our canals similar to Lake Trafford, we would likely have a lot more nutrient impairments. I am currently working on the fiscal year 20 annual surface report, which is due the end of this month. So I have to hurry up and get out of here so I can finish that report. What you can expect to see are snapshots of each watershed like this. These watershed snapshots include some general information on the drainage area, the land use, the current impairments, the water quality trends, and the number of exceedances. You can dig into each watershed and see where the problems are. In many cases, it's just one sampling site that's causing the issues for the entire watershed. This report will also have more information about the sucralose testing we did. Sucralose is an artificial sweetener. You may know it as Splenda. It turns out that sucralose is not removed by the wastewater treatment process, and it doesn't break down in the environment easily. So it makes an ideal tracer for wastewater impacts. This is the first time that we've analyzed sucralose in the surface water, and with help from the Basin, We have now a baseline for that parameter. I also wanted to introduce you to our interactive water quality map that's available online. It includes all of our current and historic monitoring sites, including surface water, groundwater, sediment, and red tide. It has layers that include the water body boundaries, the current impairments that I just discussed, so you don't have to remember them. You can just easily reference this map. Last year, I began uploading a layer like the one you see here that shows the annual averages of water quality for each station. You can select any parameter that we monitor. And like the map you see where I selected total nitrogen, it shows you proportionally the amount of total nitrogen based on all sites sampled in fiscal year 20. So the bigger the dot, the higher the nitrogen concentration. It gives you a good idea where the hotspots are for any given parameter. If you click on the dot itself, you will get the entire record for all the parameters at that site for FY20. In addition to our annual surface water report that I mentioned, we are currently have our contractor working on our surface water trend report. This report is done every 5 years, and it examines long and short-term trends back to 1999. So that report will tell us whether or not we're getting better or worse in the long term and in the short term. The last trend report was done in 2015, and it is available on our website. But I do have the little clips in my watershed snapshots that tell you what's going up and what's going down based on the last report. We also have Florida International University finishing up a sediment report. They got the sampling and analysis done, and then were shut down by COVID, so the report got delayed. And we do this report every 5 years as well. And the reason we sample sediment is because sediment is usually a better indicator of chronic water quality issues. Where surface water is more of a flashy thing. Sediment will tell you if it's an ongoing problem and it's been a problem. And then next on the agenda for FY22 is source tracking with isotopes. Isotopes are these magical creatures used like fingerprints to determine the source of nutrients. This will be my first dip into the isotope pool, so there's been a learning curve and how best to select and use them to ensure we get accurate source tracking. The Basin is funding analysis of isotopes in the Lake Trafford watershed. So hopefully, if done correctly, we should be able to tell if the nutrients are sewage-based, fertilizer-based, and if they're entering the lake from groundwater or surface water or both. So the county's actually hoping to use this same technology to test other sites within the county where we're going to do some source tracking. And I love that after 30 years of doing water quality in Collier County, I still get to play with like new technology like this. I get so geeked up. So it's like being a detective. So with that, I will take any questions.
Thank you so much for your presentation, Rhonda. Board members, if you're in the room, just press your button so I can recognize you to speak. And for Mr. Hill, please click your raise the hand feature and I'll call on you. Mr. Hill. Go ahead with your question, Andy.
It would work better if I forgot to hit the start video, which let's see if that works so you can see me. Nope, that doesn't work, but the mute button I did take care of. I apologize. I'll repeat myself. Rhonda, very interesting presentation. I look forward to meeting you in person and talking about the technology you use as well to analyze things. It's incredible what's going on with the resources that are now available to you, I assume, as I've seen in the healthcare industry. Let's start out with a couple questions in regard to what is not evaluated. I did not see any analysis of herbicides and pesticides.
Correct. We don't do any herbicide or pesticide monitoring in the surface water, only because like I mentioned about the surface water being so flashy, you would literally have to do stormwater monitoring if you were going to capture recently used herbicides or pesticides. So we do herbicide, pesticide monitoring in groundwater and also in the sediment.
Okay, yeah, sediment seems like it would make more sense. And then I'm a little concerned about the development, especially in the East Trail area. and the sites that are in that area seem rather sparse. I'm familiar with a number of those locations, but now we see a significant amount of development in that area. I'm wondering if you have adequate monitoring sites given that change in our community.
I think we tried to capture the bigger outfalls to the development in East Naples. I'm not sure how far east you're talking about. We have sites all the way out to Barron River Canal at 29. East of that,
Yes.
that's all owned by Big Cypress National Preserve, and they have their own water quality monitoring that they do, and I believe a contract with the district to do that.
Yeah, I was actually looking at the areas out to the turn to Goodland. That area is, which is a lot of it was agriculture, is now being significantly developed. And I just wonder if we have our hands on monitoring that as to what the potential effects may be and if it's being studied.
We do have sites in the East Trail around Tomato Road and 41, which would be just west of the 92. So that's going to capture
getting
the
close there.
inputs that way. Yeah. And then I think the district is still monitoring some sites in the southern end of Picayune. Yeah. So I try to stay out of their way and, you know, it's a cooperative effort. We don't want to duplicate anything they're doing.
Yeah, and then my last question is I just want to come back. You talked about the impaired areas. I think fully understand what actions are being taken and what areas of government are addressing areas that are impaired.
So, like I said, once it's declared impaired, DEP can come in and set a TMDL. They've done that for only 3 of our watersheds. And in those 3 watersheds where there's a TMDL, we've done extensive monitoring, source tracking, education and outreach projects. I mean, Lake Trafford restoration would take up an entire
Right.
day. Cocohatchee River, we've got projects in there right now because it's a fecal coliform impairment. We are doing sewage line replacement right now. And then Gordon River Extension, we've got septic to sewer conversions. We got stormwater improvements going on. We got the Freedom Park. We had a lot of things going on in those TMDL water bodies. And then as far as the rest of them that are just impaired, that's what we're going to be using some of the source tracking for. That's why we did the sucralose. That's why we're going to be looking at isotopes, because we want to be able to go in if we have a problem site and we know that site is causing the issues. We're looking to see, is there septic in there? What's going on? And so we are doing, that's something we have planned for FY21 and 22.
Thank you very much, Rhonda.
Sure.
Great. Ms. Rivera?
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet
Heard
you.
a lot about you. So it's a pleasure. In the tracing for the root cause or source of impairments, the isotope and sucralose, are those going to become DEP required measures so people start focusing more on the root cause rather than shooting in the dark in terms of what they're trying to resolve when
Yeah.
they are impaired?
I would venture to say yes. So the water quality that we're doing right now is what's considered ambient water quality. It's not designed to go in and source track. So then we have to go in with more sites or more parameters. DEP does do that when they have an impairment. They'll either contact us and say, hey, are you still sampling those 5 sites in that watershed that's impaired? If you are, would you mind collecting some extra bottles for us to analyze in Tallahassee? And sometimes that's isotopes, sometimes that's DNA, bacteria samples, sometimes that's pesticides. So we do cooperate with DEP, and yes, you're right, especially when people start focusing in on where that water quality problem is. Those are going to be tools that are going to be used a lot more frequently.
So when do you expect that to become a reality? And do we have the capacity to be testing
The problem right now is there's very few labs that test for it.
Mhm.
I know in the case of City of Marco hired Harvey Harper, and his isotope monitoring that he did for the city was sent to a lab in California, and it's been delayed.
I know, we're
because of
still
COVID.
waiting.
And so, yeah, so there's a big push to use these tools, but there's not a lot of labs that do it. So that's part of the problem. Plus, a lot of these tests are really expensive. So sometimes it's easier to go in and use some of the simpler tests that we're using now, like just going in and using E. coli and going into that watershed and backing up into that watershed, going upstream and getting your own fingerprint of, is it high here? If it's not high here, then it must be in between these 2 points, and using those cheaper techniques to try to narrow that focus. So that when you get the DNA test or the isotope test, you get a bigger bang for your buck. You have a better answer when you get that result.
So you did mention Marco,
Mhm.
and while we're waiting on Harper's report, what other areas other than Marco are not participating in this type of analysis, which is so comprehensive right now?
I don't think that there's so many different agencies involved. So we do Cocohatchee River, so that covers that. City of Naples does Naples Bay and Moorings Bay. Pelican Bay does well, we actually do Pelican Bays, but so we have the Pelican Bay inland, and then Clam Pass and Clam Bay. Marco's got their own contractor. Rookery Bay has sites that they do to keep their NOAA status. And if there are gaps in that data, DEP will come down and take samples in any watershed where there's a data gap.
Okay, well, that's good to know. Thank you.
Well, I don't see any other hands up here, so I have a couple of questions.
Not sure my button's working.
No,
Go ahead.
go ahead, please, Dan.
One, thanks for the presentation. Second thing is, I think one of the things I've learned is this is unbelievably complicated and different parameters affect different things. So it's really hard to just pin some of these things to one thing, but nutrients are obviously a huge concern. And so one of the things I'm curious about is you had the one slide that shows exceedances in dry season, exceedances in wet season. And we know that we're getting water and pollutants with the water to our canals via either groundwater flow or surface runoff. Do we see huge changes in concentrations of nutrients in the canals, dry season versus wet season, where that might tell us, that perhaps it might basically help us apportion how much of this is a groundwater flow problem that you might deal with one way versus how much of this might be a stormwater problem that you might deal with a different way?
That's a really good question. I wish I had a really easy answer. It kind of depends on where you are. We have groundwater wells, along the coastal ridge there in City Naples that are really high in nutrients, that likely a lot of the nutrient issues could be legacy, and they could be coming from groundwater in the dry season. But if you have a specific land use and a site right downstream of that land use, it could depend on what time of year it is. We definitely see seasonal spikes and for nutrients and a lot of the parameters.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks. I assume there wasn't a simple answer just because.
That's why it's really hard to trend surface water data because of that seasonality. You have that peak and ebb. So you can't really just put a line on it and be like, yeah, it's straight across. So there's a specific trend analysis that is used for surface water data that shows seasonality to be able to say, yes, it's getting better or not getting better. And they take that seasonality out of it.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I have a couple of follow-up questions for you. At the beginning of your presentation, you mentioned that the Collier County pollution control effort was, I think, the first certified in the state.
First government agency certified field sampling program. Yes.
And what does that mean? What does that mean now that you're certified?
So it means that every 2 years we get an extensive audit, the same type of audit that they come in to the lab and they will take a result and track that result through your entire system. They go out with our field crews. They make sure that all our T's are crossed, I's are dotted. Not saying that we don't get audited on a regular basis. And I've done this, called DEP and requested an audit for our groundwater program because nobody was coming. And I'm like, I want to have it checked. So this field accreditation that we have is just another layer of checks and balances to make sure that we're doing everything we're supposed to be doing. And we can say, we were checked. We have a report that says we're doing everything we need to be doing.
So it confirms the validity of what you're reporting out to the decision makers and also to the public.
Yes. Yes.
Well, that helps clarify that. Also, you showed a map where you talked about various areas that were impaired, could have a different use. Some could be impaired because they were shellfish harvesting designated versus recreation designated. That map that you showed of the coastline of Collier County, what areas are recreational designated and which ones are shellfish designated? I know there's some waters around Marco Island that are shellfish designated, but what about coming up the coast on the county?
So almost all of our estuaries are considered class 2 shellfish harvesting waters. I think we've got maybe 2 that are class 3 marine. That is up by 10 City. And I think the other one is along the coast of Marco. But the far majority of them are class 2 shellfish harvesting. And then once you cross that weir, that freshwater, saltwater barrier up into our inland areas, those are all class 3 water bodies that are intended for recreational use. So swimming, boating, fishing.
So would it be fair to say that the coastline of Collier County is primarily classified as shellfish harvesting waters? That helps a lot. You also pointed out in your presentation the big gap, and the big gap is the lack of any kind of monitoring or sampling in the canals.
It's not lack of monitoring, it's lack of standards. So we monitor and we have nutrient standard or nutrient results, but we don't have anything to say that's good or bad. There's no way to permit a discharge to say meet water quality standards for nitrogen and phosphorus because we don't have any.
Who would have to determine that?
DEP.
Okay, is that something that you're working with DEP on to
Yes.
find that
Yes.
common ground?
Yes, they did I want to say it was a 2-year canal study on the East Coast and then a 3-year canal study over here. And they pulled all the data together and they were at a loss as to how to come up with an actual number. The way they developed those standards for the rest of the state was because they're natural streams, they were able to go in and look at the critters that live on the bottom and determine based on the health of those critters, this is the level of nutrients we want to meet. Well, down here where we have highly managed waterways, we're scooping them out and we're treating them, and we can't go in and look at that because we've already altered that natural system. So they can't use that same methodology to come up with criteria for the canal. So they're still working on it and I still keep poking at them criteria. So anytime there's a triennial review of the state standards, I encourage everybody to plug in and listen. And, that's what we need to get criteria. It's going to make our lives a lot easier to manage if we have numbers to use.
Now, I seem to recall a couple of Zoom sessions that I attended with water quality standards being discussed with DEP now. Will that include the canals or do you know if that will include the canal?
Unless they've come up with criteria since the last time they've had a meeting, I don't know if there's going to be anything in there, but I still like to attend the meetings and say, hey, we still need criteria down here.
That's a good point you brought up. And you mentioned that you used Lee County standards. Lee County has standards.
So in that map that I had on there it's called the Peninsular Region of Florida. And DEP lumped different areas of Florida together based on that research they did on those little things that live in the bottom. And they decided that that region was all similar. So we're going to give you the same nutrient criteria for your streams and rivers. So that's the only thing I have that's even close to Collier County or South Florida to use as a criteria. If I had used Lake Trafford's, which are different, it's a lake, it shouldn't be treated like a canal or a moving water body. But if I had used those, there'd be a lot more things showing impairment or a lot more exceedances.
Mhm. Okay, good. Hopefully we'll move forward with that and get that gap closed because I think it's really important. And I think the board would agree that we'd like to have you come back once you've analyzed the sucralose results and maybe give us an update as well on how the isotope testing is going with Lake Trafford, because this board has been a partner with the county on some of these efforts. And we'd like to have an update every now and then. So
Certainly. Be
thank
happy
you.
to.
Thank you so much, Rhonda. Appreciate everything.
Actually, it was terrific. Thank you.
You even got applause. Yay, that's great.
Madam Chair, could we take a quick recess? We're having some technical issues.
Sure,
with our
let,
Microphones.
okay, let's take a 10-minute recess.
Thank you.
We'll reconvene at 2:22.
Colonel, can we ask her some more questions during the recess or?
Find one that's not working?
They can't hear you or Ms. Rivera.
Okay.
Madam Chair, you have a live mic.
Thank you, Ms. Keeler. I appreciate that. We'll now go to public comment on item 7. Aaron, are there any members of the public that would like to speak?
Yes, Madam Chair. I have Jeff Rosenau. If you could unmute yourself, sir. Mr. Rosenau, can you hear us? If you could please unmute yourself if you're with us. Might have been an accident.
Do we have any public comment?
There are no more public comments at this time, Madam Chair.
Okay, great. Thank you, Aaron. All right, now we're ready to move on to the next item on our agenda, which is the Big Cypress Basin Capital Plan reallocation with Lucine Dadrian.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and Basin Board members. Lucine Adrian, I am the Project Management Section Administrator in Engineering Construction Bureau. I'm here to present for your consideration reallocations within the capital plan for this fiscal year, as well as an update for the 5-year plan going forward. So this is our current approved fiscal year budget for the total of $3.675 million. And I will go through line by line what I think the changes are, or what I know the changes are, and explain that to you and discuss that at the end. So for SCADA replacements, we originally budgeted $275,000. Our construction package that is ongoing for multiple sites for SCADA is on the order of $490,000, and we have some additional expenditures in design. For Cypress 1 structure relocation, originally we intended to move out later in the year, but after confirmation with Collier County, we are moving into construction soon. We will be awarding a contract at the May governing board, requesting that approval at the board. The lowest responsive and responsible bidder is Kiewit Infrastructure at $4.32 million. The engineer's estimate was around $3.5 million. We received multiple bids and we went with the third lowest bidder based on their references and that they met the references. So the next item is the remote monitoring communications. We had budgeted $500,000 this year for the joint Collier County Operations Control Room. We've delayed this project based on their availability to move forward with this project. And so that's been delayed till 2023. The electrification and remote operations project, we budgeted around $1 million. We have the first package with 3 sites that is currently moving. And then we're going to go out to bid for the second package, which includes Court 2 remote operations and FACA Union 5 generator control building. We'll be partially funding it this year, going to June board to request award, and then fully funding it in the remainder in fiscal year 22. Canal improvements, we had a budget of $1 million. That assumed that we would have some construction projects this year. We're not in that phase yet. We're still in the assessment mode. What we have added to this line item is the assessment and the assessment of the FACA Union Canal for bank stabilization efforts. And we will have a typical design that we'd be able to move forward with to improve areas that have lost canal banks and right of way. The Miller number 3 gate replacement, this project was fully funded in FY20, so the $250,000 is available to be adjusted or rebudgeted. The C1 connector canal control gate, this had $300,000 for a design start, but its conceptual design is incorporated within the canal improvements line item. So within Miller and C1 canal improvements assessment, its future design has been pushed out a couple of years until the assessments are complete. So we do have a new add to our 5-year plan that was not planned for. And that is the Big Cypress Basin Field Station Enhanced Security Updates. And with that, I'd like to introduce Jesus Carrasco. He is the Field Ops Bureau Chief for this region.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, board members.
Good afternoon.
So the security system at the intrusion security system for the field station is an enhancement to protect our vehicles.
Excuse me, Jesus, you need to speak into the microphone. You can move it closer to you.
You hear me now?
Yes, you can bend it. You can bend it closer to you. Well, maybe I shouldn't have said that. That's a first.
Okay, I won't touch it. Thank you, sir.
Maybe I should have said gently bend. Maybe that was the operative word.
You start with it.
Go ahead. Sorry about that.
The BCB field station requires an enhanced security system. The increased growth in the area with the building of the park and more activity on the weekends, especially with parks being enhanced, hotels, and more businesses coming into the area. We feel like we need to enhance our security system at the field station. The security system, it's a standard feature that we have throughout our different facilities within the district. This will help protect our assets and our vehicles from vandalism or theft. The system is typical, like I said, that we have in other field stations, other district facilities. It is monitored 24 hours a day from our B1 security office, and there's no monthly monitoring cost for that.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Jesus. So moving forward, after going through all the line items that we're working on this year, we have the approved budget of $3.675 million. We're looking to spend this year about approximately $2.448 million. And with the balance of 1.2, we would rebudget that into the following fiscal year to spend the money when the money is going to get spent for our construction projects. So here's our updated 5-year plan that we're going to look for some discussion on. So changes that we've made to date. So first line, SCADA replacements. This includes moving out on Henderson Creek #1 Stillingwell site. This is a flood control structure that is dilapidated, and the access to this site is difficult. We've added the bird rookery swamp 2 sites per year over 22 and 23 so that we can determine what needs to be built at Cork 3 down the road. And then in the out year of 24, we have an additional 2 sites for along Airport Road and County Road 951. As mentioned, the Remote Monitoring Communications Operations Control Center has been moved out to fiscal year 23. Cypress 1 originally budgeted $2 million. We've increased that to $3.9 million to account for when the money is going to be spent, as well as the increased costs in the construction bid. BCB Communications Tower was originally part of the remote monitoring and communication line, has been pulled out. So originally we assumed we'd start with $250,000 in fiscal year 22. We're reducing that amount to $117. And then the out years will account for, so 1.5 years in design and then 1.5 years in construction approximately. Electrification and remote ops, this is the balance of what we're going to out to bid for with an approximate June governing board timeframe. This is the balance of the FACA Union 5, and Cork 2 project construction dollars. Canal improvements, we've reduced the amount of what we think we need in 22. This amount is going to be for FACA Union bank stabilization work. C1 connector canal control gate, as well as Cork 3 have moved out to fiscal year 24. I-75 Weir 1 and 2 have moved out to fiscal year 25. and Faka Union 6 to fiscal year 26. So overall, what we have hard numbers for, what we're in design and in construction, we're trying to fund first based on prioritizations. And what we're still in infancy in assessments, we've pushed out to be able to manage our overall budget and not impact reserves. So at the bottom, you can see the totals per year and the changes over time. I've included the preliminary 5 years so you can see what changed and the variance from tentative to preliminary. So next year we'll be spending more money, but in future years, we'll have reductions. So that helps us balance out and not eat up our reserves and go in a negative balance. So this is the 5-year. We do have another option in regards to the 5-year plan, and that is to use some fiscal year 22 intergovernmental funding that may not be used. We'd like to repurpose that money and move forward and complete all of the SCADA work that's required. That's in the Henderson Creek 1, the Airport Road site, as well as the County Road 951 site. So we'd like to move out all at once instead of breaking that into two fiscal years over 3 years and complete the work as soon as possible. This would be the balance of the flood control sites that we need to rehab or replace and get us moving quicker on our priority sites. So our recommendations, we're looking to the board to discuss, to consider and approve the revised reallocation of the fiscal year 2020-2021 capital plan, as well as provide direction to staff on the SCADA implementation in the tentative 2022 capital plan. I have pictures here on this slide that show Henderson Creek 1 in its current condition with limited access, and part of the structure is falling into the canal. And then on the right, you'll see a hardened flood control site that was built recently within the capital plan for Curry. And this is the headwater upstream SCADA stilling well. With that, I'll ask for questions.
Thank you, Lucine, for your presentation. Before we move into the board comments, I just would like the board members to note that we'll be giving direction to staff today on this item. We don't have to take a vote on it, but we will be giving direction on whether or not, as you see here, that we support their recommendations, or if we want the staff to do something else. So with that, I'll open it up for board comment. Are there any hands raised or comments on this item from the board?
Yeah, Madam Chair, I don't know if my button's working or not, but my instinct would be to follow the staff recommendation, just kind of anecdotally from hearing things about issues they're having with construction out in that area around where our field station is. I think you're exactly right. It's getting a lot more activity. And if somebody wants to make off with a piece of equipment, it's easy access to the interstate. And, I've heard of contractors that have equipment go missing out there and you never see it again. So I think it's wise to be in front of that. The other issue on the Vanderbilt Beach Road, Cypress Canal Weir, just completely understand that, it's over budget. It's really, really difficult to budget anything these days. Just the market is crazy. There's a tremendous amount of demand and very little supply of workers and materials. And the cost of those things are all going up. So I don't know that we have a choice to push it off, but to do it. I think the other choice is, do we roll that money on the intergovernmental program that we don't have a use for right now into the SCADA world? And I would probably say my instinct would be yes, to go ahead and do that, because again, if we don't have a use for that money right now planned, I would say let's go ahead and get these things done, because it could be the pricing on these things could be even higher in a year. You just don't know.
Those are some really excellent points. Thank you. Mr. Hill?
I think we covered a lot of this on Tuesday in the preparation for the meeting. Just wanted to make sure if there wasn't any projects that you feel would be needed sooner than later, but due to the constraints that Dan articulated very well, that you just got to put it out to fit into the budgeting process. Is there any projects that you really feel that we ought to be finding a way to get done sooner?
We don't have anything that we need to move any sooner. Everything that's in design, we would like to go out to construction.
Okay.
And that everything in its infancy in assessments are out year projects. So at this time, we just would like to complete construction.
Yeah. Get it done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Nanette?
My only comment is I don't have any issues with the movement of outer years and then what you're pulling into the closer years. The only question I have is in terms of staffing, can you comment if the staff we have can meet these bubbles that we are creating due to opportunistic spending that earlier than later?
Definitely. I have assigned project managers and construction managers already overseeing these projects. So it would just help to keep it moving and complete the projects.
So are we borrowing more from the district at BCB or your project managers are fully in managing the work?
Our project managers are fully managing the work.
Excellent. Thank you.
I have a couple of comments. One, I support the staff recommendations, and I think that these photos are a good example of some of the structures that are still out there. And flood protection is our number one priority. And I think that it's important that we have all of the tools to do that job as best as we can. In addition, though, what kind of convinced me as well was the intergovernmental, because I think that our partners are being very, very responsible with taxpayers' money in wanting to monitor the results of the projects that they've put in place with our assistance as the board. And I think that's very responsible. And I think that it's not a negative thing. I think it's a positive thing. It just allows us to move this money forward. So I fully support this recommendation as well. And I'd like to hear from the public. Erin, if we have anyone from the public who would like to speak on this.
Madam Chair, I have no public comment at this time.
Okay, thank you, Erin. So I think that the board direction is clear, that we support these staff recommendations. And so that's your direction.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, the next item on our agenda is the Picayune Watershed Water Quality Feasibility Study. And we have Jen Leeds, who's come from West Palm Beach to present this to us. And this is pretty exciting. Thank you, Jen, for traveling.
Very gently. Good afternoon, Madam Chair and Basin Board members. It's nice to be back to present in front of the Basin Board. Jennifer Leeds, I am the Bureau Chief for the Ecosystem Restoration Planning Group. And I am here today to talk to you about the Picayune Watershed Water Quality Feasibility Study. This is an informative brief. There's no real decisions at the end, but this study has concluded. So we felt it was a good time to come back to the board and tell you about the results of the study, some of the next steps, and kind of go over what the purpose of the project was again. So what I'd like to do is, since it's been a while since we've all talked about this, is to kind of reset the stage for this project. Let me see if I can get this cursor going. Okay. So I kind of want to take just a little bit of time and talk off this map on the right and kind of set the stage for what this project is, what this feasibility study was, and where it is located, but also what it was not. So if we're looking at this map on the right of your screen, we have several different areas that are highlighted. And so it's very easy to confuse this project with the comprehensive Everglades Restoration Plan project that we have going on out there as well, called the Picayune Strand Restoration Project. And that is the hatched area in red that is here. But this feasibility study came about when we were about a year and a half ago, talking about some of the flows, some of the existing flows from upstream areas that were going to be coming under US 41 and flowing under US 41 and County Road 92, and some of the future flows, and some of the water quality concentrations. And so this study was really a response to some of the local stakeholders and the questions and the concerns that were coming up as a result of that. It really didn't have anything to do with the water quality coming off the Picayune project. Currently right now within the Picayune Strand Restoration Project, water is still coming down the canals that are north and south and coming under FACA Union here. Once this project is complete, these canals will be backfilled and this will all be sheet flow, and the water quality will be very good coming off of this project. So to kind of orient ourselves with the different areas that we have here, again, the hatched area in red is the Picayune Strand Restoration Project, and this is our SIRP project. To the west, we have the Belmead area. We have the agricultural and urban areas over here also to the west. And then the areas that we have to the south of US 41 are Collier Seminole State Park and 10,000 Islands National Wildlife Refuge. And the importance of these are all outstanding Florida waters, which means they have additional special protections. And so the water that we're talking about, let me flip over to this next map here, because this kind of highlights it. So the map on the left, we've got a circle of some existing culverts that go under US 41 and come under County Road 92. So this is the area that we focused on in this water quality feasibility study, and areas upstream to kind of take a look at to see what we could do to kind of develop some low-cost passive projects that would improve water quality as it flowed into the downstream areas, into Collier Seminole State Park and into 10,000 Islands National Wildlife Refuge. The map on the right is just kind of like an estimate of what we're looking at for some flow directions. It's not exactly what may happen, but this is some of the areas that we think is going to happen. I would also like to point out on this map that the red dots are existing culverts, and the green ones that we see here under US 41 and again under County Road 92 are going to be new culverts coming in the future. So what we did is to address the concerns that were brought up. We wanted to take a collaborative approach. And what I mean by that is this wasn't so much just a water management district project or a basin project. We wanted to get all the local stakeholders with interest because they are the ones that have the local knowledge, right? And have the local information. And we really wanted to leverage that. And what we didn't want to do is take 18 months or 2 years to kind of do a study. So we did a very focused study, which kind of focused our scope on projects. And so the point that I'm getting at with that is we wanted to look at what projects could improve water quality versus doing things like, what additional BMPs could be implemented, because that is outside of the scope of this project and the authority that we had for this. And we were doing it on an accelerated timeline. We said, look, we don't want to take, a lot of time. We want to be able to get something tangible that we could take and move forward with and move on to the next step. So we said, well, let's see if we can get this thing done in 6 months. And so what we did is we got everyone together, kind of put our heads together and then move this thing forward. So what we did was, as you can see, we kicked off the study in July of 2020, and then we just completed it in March of 2021. And we also wanted to do this in a public process because we wanted to have the public participate, have their knowledge coming in, So it wasn't just state agencies or federal agencies. We also had county agencies like Collier County participating. We had DEP, Collier Seminole State Park on here as well. Then we also had a lot of our environmental stakeholders, and they've got a lot of knowledge that we wanted to be able to bring in. And we also had the agricultural community at the table as well. So we said, this is a time when we can all look for those partnerships, because at the end of the day, instead of this being just a water management district project, we wanted this to be more of a partnership, whether we're partnering with the public or we're partnering with other private individuals to come up with something. So that was the approach that we did. And so when we did that, we also conducted 3 public meetings throughout, and we did that via Zoom in our new pandemic world. But conducting those projects via Zoom, we got a lot of really good participation. We got a lot of really good comments out of it, and it was a very successful platform and format. So, okay, so a little bit more into what we call this collaborative approach. The team put a lot of effort into it. We hired a local consulting firm who was also very knowledgeable with the area, had a lot of background information, and we formed a couple of different working groups and technical groups. So we had a working group that met once a month, which had a little bit more oversight of what was going on, talked a little bit more policy, and trying to tackle some of those more sticky issues. And then we had technical group who, what really ended up landing into the final report, they're the ones who also brought their knowledge and information and gave that over to our consultant to add into the final report. So our final report ended up being this really nice kind of all-inclusive background feasibility study. So if you wanted to say, oh, look, maybe what's the water quality look like in some certain area? Well, we can leverage that because we have links to where you can locate that in the report. Previous projects that have worked and that have been done in the basin in the area that have improved water quality, let's get that in the report as well. In addition, we leveraged a lot of the alternative technology information that we had gained for the water management district for our C43 water quality treatment component, right? Because they did a lot of effort and a lot of work on that. So we said, let's not reinvent the wheel. Let's pull that information in as well. So that was really the scope and the focus of that technical group in the beginning, was to kind of help bring all that information together so that we can then take that and then build off of that. One of the things we quickly realized when we were looking at in this area, and you can see it on this map, which kind of highlights it, is that we were really going to have a challenge with land, right? If you need to put a project on the landscape, you need land, whether you're talking 5 acres or 500 acres. So to reorient ourselves again, here's the Picayune Restoration Project. You've got the agricultural and urban areas up here, all up in here. You've got US 41 running through the middle. This is all Collier Seminole State Park, 10,000 islands. These other smaller parcels, you've got private areas in here mixed in with some county parcels. So, if you're talking about trying to do something to improve water quality before it goes into Collier Seminole State Park, your land is very limited. So that also helped to shape this feasibility study. A lot of times people really want to gravitate right to a stormwater treatment area, but that takes a lot of land. So maybe there's other things that could be done within existing canals, or if you have a smaller footprint with advanced treatment technologies. And again, with this collaborative approach and having all these different people at the table, what we really wanted to do was leverage these project partnerships. And then we also wanted to be responsive to our stakeholders and our environmental communities who are like, hey, we want to also be able to go out there and leverage funding, because everyone's budgets are very tight, right? And we're all very focused. However, the state is also very focused on improving water quality. It's one of the governor's top priorities. So we also wanted to address that as well. So one of our deliverables that we had was a project one-pager, which was a really nice, concise summary that could be taken and educate other entities and other groups on what the approaches that we did and what were some of the options and alternatives that could be implemented. So let's talk about that a little bit, because One of the highlights, again, is the, this is an example of the project one pager that we have. And it actually lists the various alternatives that have different treatment components in it. So there's there's different options. It's like a suite of options, depending on maybe what land size that you may have. But we also ended up with this report that, again, like I was saying earlier, was very comprehensive and very inclusive. And a part of that, we had this, they call it an information collection report, but this is where a lot of that existing information that was out there that they collected, that they put in there now resides, that we have. So the report is in such a way that you can then take that and then move that to the next step, whether you want to go into citing or whether you want to actually have, if you have identified a partnership with someone, you then have that background information that will then lead you into like a conceptual design, right? Because you have some of your options that you could use if you knew the size of maybe a site where you could cite a project. And so what it did was, again, it came up with a suite of various project alternatives. And so again, what we had our consultant do is, instead of using a specific piece of land, we said, if you had 50 acres available or 200 or say 400, come up with different treatment train options that could be placed on the landscape. That would also be predicated on funding. So if you had maybe a certain amount of dollars, you might put one particular project alternative. However, if you had more and you had the land available, you could then put another component on there that would work in conjunction with each other. So that's what they did. So it gave options, and it gave a suite of options for different alternatives for different project size footprints. And we talked about that. It also looked at different advanced treatment technologies, project partnerships. There's also a very nice, very inclusive and detailed section in there on various funding options on different areas where funding could be leveraged. Maybe it's 2 or 3 different funding, if it's, grants or whatever that you could put together to then, advance a project forward. And then they had a recommendation section. And so all of this is in this one nice inclusive report. And then again, we have the one pager that was a deliverable that came out of that as well. So where do we go from here? It's the question everyone's asking. Both the one pager and the report are available to the public. We've been still collaborating and working with Collier County and some of our local stakeholders. We're still engaging them because we feel like whatever is moved forward, that collaborative effort was very successful in leveraging that knowledge and also the passion that those other agencies and entities bring to it, to the project. So we're still working on that. And then the next step too would be to kind of look at what we call a siting analysis, taking a closer look on, what is available out there, whether they're, public-private partnerships, working in other areas, seeing what might be available, no matter what the size. Maybe there's other areas we haven't thought of yet to see where we could kind of take this next. And so with that, I'll take any questions you may have.
Thank you, Jen, for your excellent presentation. Any board questions or comments? Okay. Nanette?
Jennifer, the way I see this project is that this is a win-win. There is no downside to our as-is or status quo right now. You're not going to be adding nutrients or pollutants to any of the waters that we're talking about. What we have is what we got. So we can only make it better, if you will. So that's an envious type of project. The only aspect of this project that is a little worrisome is that it's actually more of a change management dynamic that you're dealing with rather than an engineering and arithmetic problem. I'm very confident that from a engineering point of view, we can resolve whatever the challenges are and stay within a reasonable cost. It's just how do we balance the agricultural community, the environmental community, and the engineering feasible implementation or successful implementation community. And can you comment on the atmosphere that you're operating under, which is where your challenges are going to be, or is it, and is there going to be a political side to this that we're going to have to manage through?
Well, what I think I'll do is I'll comment on the what I saw was the atmosphere of this collaborative approach and the project that we did, right? We saw participation from everybody. Everyone was focused on a common goal. Everyone wanted to bring their information and their expertise to the table to make this a better effort. And at the end of the day, I think that's how we feel about it, because again, I think, as I was saying earlier, the local stakeholders, the local environmental groups, but also the local agricultural and urban groups that are over here, they know best. This is where everyone lives. And so they bring their passion to that. And so I always felt like, we had a couple of tough conversations during some of the technical and working groups, but they were good conversations, right? And I think another thing that helped was the scope and the focus of the study itself. It's like, we're here to look to see how we can come up with some good, very cost-effective projects that can fit in on the landscape wherever we can to kind of make things better. So to me, it was a really, really positive atmosphere and really good conversations. And I had conversations personally myself with various different groups and with various different people, and they were all very good, very positive.
I attended many of the sessions. And I think that if I could just kind of back up a little bit, many of the stakeholders have been looking at how to improve the quality of the water in the Picayune watershed, especially if and when the Picayune Strand Restoration Project, the SERP project, comes online. And there's the new conveyance that's built, which is called the Southwest Protection Feature, around the agriculture and urban environment and the water flow changes. So each of them have been working on this probably since 2007, and they all had bits and pieces, Ms. Rivera, of this effort. And they were separate efforts. They weren't a cohesive, collaborative effort. And so what we were able to do, we probably began this 2.5 years ago. The governing board approved the funds for the consultant to lead this effort with the staff and the stakeholders to come together and to identify some opportunities to move forward with this. And you see, if you've read the report, it's 440 pages. It's got a lot of good information in it, but a lot of that came from stakeholders that was then reviewed and scientifically validated and brought up to date based upon the prior, based upon it being 2020, 2021 when we were looking at it. So I'm very proud of everyone who participated in this effort, because this is where everyone shared their information and together produced one cohesive, collaborative document on this watershed. And for the discussions and for the give and take and for the ideas, and then add 3 public sessions on top of that, and the public had their ideas too. It was very, very well done. And the 1-pager is meant for the stakeholders to use to give a summary of the project in order to maybe get grants or to look for opportunities for grants, maybe to talk to their legislative representatives in that case. So the main limitation is the area is already grown up and it's an urban agricultural environment. We keep growing east. And so the limiting thing is this siting, what site could contain something that could help us. So I hope that helps, just to give a little background.
That's excellent. Thank you.
Okay, any questions from the board, for the board, or from the board for Jen on this before we go to public comment? Okay, Erin, any members of the public would like to speak?
Yes, Madam Chair. I have Brad Cornell.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and board members. This is Brad Cornell. I'm here on behalf of Audubon, Florida and Audubon Western Everglades, and appreciate the opportunity to hear the report from Jennifer Leeds and to comment. And so thank you for that. I do want to compliment Jennifer Leeds and her colleagues at the Water Management District and the consultant that was hired to see us through this stakeholder process. I did participate as robustly as I could on behalf of Audubon, as did many of my peers in other stakeholder groups. And it was an excellent process and a good opportunity to engage in some real substantial discussion. I want to flag an important recommendation that's in the report that we found, many of us in the conservation community found to be an absolutely vital part of this process. And that is the identification of sources of pollution, of nutrients in particular, from urban and agricultural land uses that are in this immediate vicinity. As the restoration waters flow, those pollutants will invariably get drawn down into the outstanding Florida waters to the south, including Rookery Bay and the Collier Seminole State Park. So we all thought it was very important, in addition to identifying within the scope of this feasibility study, to identify where the pollutants were coming from and what means we might have of collaborating with farmers and the neighborhoods. There's a couple of urban neighborhoods in this area in stemming the flow of those nutrients in the first place. In other words, source control. And the advantage of that we discussed was that you're going to reduce the amount of land you need to clean up that water if you can control your sources of pollution better. And you're going to reduce the costs of implementation of the water quality features that are being recommended in this report. So they go hand in hand. And the other part of this is that it should be synced. The source control and the construction and funding design of the water quality features should be synced with the construction and completion of the Picayune Strand SERP project, because we want those all to be coming to bear as the waters from the operational phase of Picayune Strand start to flow to the southwest. So again, I just want to emphasize how important that collaborative partnership process of source control that should go in parallel with the water quality projects. So thanks very much for considering this.
Erin, are there any additional public comments?
Madam Chair, I have no more public comment at this time.
Okay, thank you, Brad, for your comments today, and thank you, Jen, for your presentation. All right, the next item on our agenda is our first board comment period. Does any of the board have comments at this time, or I'm going to save a couple comments for the later board comment period, but if anybody has something now, feel free to speak. Okay, then we'll go on then to our technical reports. We're going to begin with the field station activity report with Juan Betancourt.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, board members. This is Juan Betancourt. I'm the BCB Field Station Superintendent, and I will be reporting on field station activities. I will be talking about the dry season activities, what we have been working on with the field station personnel. So I'll be going over canal maintenance, canal debris removal, structure preventative maintenance, and the tree removal project that we had a kickoff meeting for, and of course, the 3-month outlook. As part of the canal maintenance, we had to fix some erosion issues along Airport Pooling Canal. This area, this particular area you're seeing on this slide is by the Pelican Marsh Elementary School. We had to fix around half mile on the northwest bank. And you see the pictures of how we saw it, some of the during, and of course the after picture. On the next 3 slides, I want to show some of the debris removal that the field station has been working on. On this particular slide, shows the Green Canal, where we found a bunch of branches floating around the canal. And you can see the one of the equipment we have at the field station, which is called the convert boat, just picking up some of those debris. And again, you see some of the before, during, and after pictures. This slide shows the Golden Gate Canal, a wood structure that needed to be removed. It was from one of the properties alongside of the canal. For this particular activity, we had to get authorization from the owner, but the job was done and completed, and you see, and the neighbor agreed with our proposal. And again, you see some before, during, and after pictures. This slide shows the C1 connector. While we were performing one of our inspections throughout the canals, we found this boat stuck in one of the culverts, and we had, of course, to remove it. And you'll see the before, during, and after pictures. For the structure maintenance, we've been repainting the ID tags for all our structures throughout the BCB area. I just want to show you some of the samples of how the tags are coming along. That way, when we have the next flight inspection, we'll be able to see what structure we're talking about. And I'm showing the I-75 number 1 structure, Miller number 2, and the FACA Union 4 structure. On a structure FU7 in the FACA Union, we were missing bow barriers on the downstream of the structure. And I just want to show you a picture of the FU7, how it looks right now, and the after picture after we installed the bow barriers. By Golden Gate, the access gate was vandalized. Of course, you see the angular member on the floor, and one of our field station team members repairing it. And that was to avoid some of the ATVs going under the structure, and not only accessing our areas, but they can have an accident out there. So we're trying to work on that as we find this kind of vandalism and activities. This particular slide shows the Golden Gate 3. This was one of our biggest challenge during this last period. On Golden Gate structures 3 and 2, we had to replace the gate positioners on the actual gates 2 and 3. So this slide shows when we installed the stop logs. That's the picture on the left. To dry up the basin, of course, we had to. The picture in the middle shows just the basin being dry completely, so we could access the sensor. And the picture on the left shows the sensor that had to be replaced. During this time, we had the visit from Ms. Rivera. That was for Golden Gate 3. And so I want to show you some of the pictures of the team working out there while we had the tailgate safety meeting. Of course, that's the picture on the left. The picture on the right shows as we were relocating the stop logs to dry up the the base on Golden Gate 3. For the tree removal project, in March, we had our first kickoff meeting with the team, and some of the selected areas we're looking at is the Cocohatchee Canal and I-75 interchange, for which we have a survey completed on tree removal. We have the airport pooling canal, the east side from Immokalee Road to Vanderbilt Beach Road. Again, we have a survey for that one. And then we're looking at the FACA Union Canal from I-75 Bridge to the FACA Union Pump Station. And that survey is still in progress, and we're hoping to have it within, I would say, 2 to 3 weeks. For the 3-month outlook, well, we on canal maintenance, we're gonna continue doing mechanical harvesting, vegetation management, debris removal on the canal bank and weed barriers. And on structure maintenance, we will continue with our yearly work plan, performing preventative maintenance to the various structures. We will continue coordinating meetings and having a final decision on the tree removal project. On system operations, we will continue supporting the verbal operational orders coming from our water managers throughout the dry season. And on May 4th, we're going to have our pre-hurricane inspection flight for all the canal levees and structures. As in addition to our normal activities to operate and maintain the basin's flood control system, the Basin Field Station also provides operation and maintenance to the district's third project in the Picayune Strand Restoration. And that will be for the Mary, FACA, and Miller pump stations. So for dry season activities, we basically went through our regular stuff, which is test running and recirculating our pumps. On the FACA pump station, we had to do the 2,500-hour annual preventative maintenance to the right angle gear, which was a major task or gear reducer. And then we do our monthly preventative maintenance, and we do safety equipment inspections. On this picture on the left, I'm showing a sample of the right gear assembly, and a picture on the right shows a tooth and shaft gear pinion and drive for the kind of debris or any abnormality that we can find on this particular right gear assembly. For the 3-month outlook, we will be coordinating the vegetation management at the FACA pump station, the spreader berm. We're talking about that right now as we speak with the different groups. And we will continue the dry season maintenance activity for all the 3 pump stations in preparation for wet season. And with that, I will take any questions.
Thank you, Juan, for your report. Are there any board member questions for Juan? Ms. Rivera?
Mr. Betancourt, I have, first, I would like to thank you so much for taking me to the field. Your team was an outstanding, collaborative, cohesive team. I was very impressed with the work that was being accomplished and how they worked together.
Thank you for coming.
I do have a quick question. So on the pictures on page 5 where a dock or some wooden structure fell into the canal and you had to go and remove it. In that case, you were able to identify the owner of the dock or whatever the structure was. Are they back charged for the cost of removing this material out of the water?
Honest with you, with this particular boat, we couldn't find any markings, so we couldn't identify who threw it out there in the canal. There was no way to back charge anybody.
So when you can't identify it, we're kind of stuck in But if you are able to identify the ownership, you can trace it back to a charge or a negotiated charge, or how does that work?
Well, what I usually do is I would contact our security department and our risk management, and I would let them deal with the issue. And then as we get the recommendations, we move on and do whatever we have to do.
Madam Chair, can I offer something?
Yes,
as well?
please do, Ms. Keeler.
So depending on what we find in our canals, we also work very closely with Rhonda's group for pollution control. And if they are also able, we can partner with them. And if they can go after somebody for discarding items in our canal, we sometimes get assistance from them as well.
Thank you.
Mr. Hill?
Good afternoon. I look forward to visiting the pump stations once we get a little bit of the rainy season starts. Hey, just wanted to ask about the potential for any additional hazards with the boat safety device that you added at the one canal. Just want to make sure there wasn't any other situations that where we could have an accident of somebody going over a embankment or other thing. It's amazing these days of how people are so careless in their activities, but I guess we just have to look out for that. Is there anything else that we need to be addressing of safety precautions?
We do add the bow barriers in all our structures. We also do have the tough booms, which are basically the weed barriers. And those are kind of, they can show that is a safety issue for anybody boating around there. So that's the kind of stuff we're doing. In addition to that, we're also adding signs for people to be aware of, of what can happen if they get too close to one of the structures and so on and so forth. That's all we can do basically.
Yeah, it's amazing what people, just a lack of concern they have. Is what about people on foot that are fishing on the banks? Is there somebody has an eye out for potential hazards there too?
Yeah, there's always potential hazards along the canals. However, all we can do is we monitor what they do, and if we see something out of the ordinary, we call law enforcement and let them know. And that's basically all we do.
Okay.
Sir.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, I don't see any more board questions. Are there any members of the public who would like to speak, Erin?
I have no public comment at this time, Madam Chair.
Okay, with no public comment, thank you, Juan, for your report. Appreciate it. Our next report is by Brad Jackson, who's going to give us the water conditions report.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, board members. As usual, it's always a pleasure to be here to present the water conditions for our last board meeting. And in this case, it's since last February. So for the record, my name is Brad Jackson. I'm the Basin's engineer, and I'll go ahead and just kind of jump into this right here. So as usual, I've got our monthly summary here for the year for January through current. The takeaway I'm looking here on this slide, obviously it's dry season, but we're still running below average. Fortunately, April has caught us up some. We had some good rains the last couple of weeks, and that's brought us to about 70% of normal for this calendar year. So overall, it's been dry, but it wasn't necessarily unpublished, and that's kind of been an unknown thing that we've been talking about. So I'll stair step through the months and kind of give a summary of the basin rainfall. But looking back at February, and just to kind of give the rainfall, we had some context. This particular year, we had about 1.5 inches. Can still that vary quite greatly. 20 years ago, we had only 1/10 of an inch for the whole month. I like these new products. They kind of show us where the bullseye was for the month. And you can see this kind of strip of higher intensity rainfall. You got a good portion that got 3.5 to 4 inches, kind of ranging from our Henderson Creek 1 structure and running northeast. So that, all the rainfall this time of year is associated with cold fronts, and usually you get little hot spots like this with that type of pattern. Moving forward to March, not as dry as last year. Last year was our driest year. We only had 1/10 of an inch in 2020 for March, but still not too great. Only just shy of an inch. And it's hit or miss on where you got the rain. Most of the heavier rains were focused kind of in the southern area of the basin, just north of 41, kind of paralleling I-75 along this kind of red strip here. And moving forward this current month, so we finally switched, like I said before, we switched patterns a little bit. We do have 2.5 inches so far in this particular, in April. That's probably where we'll end up for the month. We don't have anything forecast going forward really. So we'll probably end up close to that 2.5 inches, which does finally reverse that trend, but it's good widespread coverage, and the timing for it's great right at the end of dry season as we're starting to turn the corner into a transitional month. So good story here. So looking back at the water year as a whole, we're 10 days or so from the end of the water year. We're not too far from average. You can't get better than 100.5% of average. So we're right where we're supposed to be. The distribution of rainfall this year was, I think, helpful. The wet season was wet, but not too wet. And then we had just enough rain late dry season to carry us through the driest part of the year. So we're still able to withhold, surface water levels pretty well for this time of year, which brings me to that brings me to the outflow. So how much did we actually leave, or how much water actually left the system throughout the water year? So these numbers here, the blue and the kind of orangish color, those represent the volume of water that we released out of the freshwater system to tide. And the kind of interesting thing to note here is that when all of these discharges started, in the bottom right, you're looking, obviously June and May. And then in the bottom right, you've got when we actually stopped discharging. So we haven't really discharged any water out of our system with the exception of FACA Union number 1 since late February. So we're really trying to hold everything we can. So you may ask, how does this GG1 represent to average? Well, I looked at it this morning. If you sum up these two numbers, that's about 90% of average of what we normally do, but we've had an average year of rainfall. So we've been able to hold on to more water than normal. We don't have a lot of storage in the basin, but we're still able to do what we can, which is great. So now we've looked back at the rainfall and what have we been able to do as far as holding water back at this time of year. And this particular slide gives us a snapshot in time of how our canal surface water levels compared to our period of record throughout the region. So what I want to note here is the abundance of blues and blacks on the left and the right side of the screen. All of the canals in blue and black are in the upper percentiles for this time of year, which is great for the end of April. It's unusual for that, and just shows how much we've been able to do with the right timing of rainfall, which is important, but then with the flexibility that our upgraded and capital program helps us retain that water. So, in this, I want to draw some note here as well in the upper portions of the basin, GG 6 and 7, this kind of black L, and this whole upper region, that we haven't been able to do that historically, given some of the constraints of the system. So it's nice to see that we're able to hold these levels higher. And as you can see on the right as well, similar story again. You've got blues, scattered throughout here. We do have one outlier. This orange guy, this particular site is lower for some reason. Just the way it's working at that particular site, but the rest of it, we're looking great for the end of April. So there's a lot of red on this slide, but that's not unusual for this time of year, given we're in dry season. That indicates that the water's below ground, as it should be in the urban areas and even in the natural areas this time of year. So I wanted to highlight here, I've got 3 different depictions of the system. On the left, you've got our current snapshot in time, and then compare that with the right, which was 1 year ago. If you remember, we had pretty significant drought throughout the region, and we had there was water restrictions in portions of the district. And then I know there were some wildfires and everything like that. So there's definitely, you can see a difference, especially in the northern area of the basin. Up here in the Crew, if you look at the kind of white squiggly outline that approximates that boundary, you can see a lot more water at or near the surface. I would highlight that the topography, especially in these northern areas, needs to be refined some more. This information is only as good as the monitoring network we have and the topography that we have. So as we continue to put in more monitoring and more, get more survey, more information, that really helps solidify this picture for us, and it gives us a better idea of what's really going on. So then just to compare and contrast, just after her Tropical Storm Eta came through, you've got, widespread water throughout the natural areas, not unusual. I'm looking forward to this year. This wet season, we'll start to see some of this Vaca Union Canal. That's going to be, it's now plugged. I mentioned that last time. So when that comes online this summer, we'll start to see that restoration flows, and hopefully we'll get these maps updated so we can start to actually visualize that a little bit better. So I mentioned the kind of information at the northern part of the system, the Crew area. And this is a new slide that I've put in there, and we've been working with Audubon, and there's some information we've been collaborating on how to look at this area. There was a report that the board received last time that showed some results for the dry down of the area, and they were gracious enough to share their information with us, their period of record. So just to kind of walk through this slide here, the upper triangle is the Lettuce Lake staff gauge. So that's the kind of point where it was shared last time. That's kind of their reference point of where it was where they were seeing it to be a little bit drier. And then Cork 2, that is our closest water control structure, kind of the furthest upstream area for our canal system in the Corkscrew canal. So on the right, these are the same types of graphs you're used to seeing now, hopefully. I've taken the Lettuce Lake period of record data and looked at that, but I only looked at 1960 through 1999. And I did that. There's a reason I did that. And I truncated the last 20 years so that was the time that the change was witnessed. That was kind of the inflection point where they started to see that drying time change. So I wanted to look at what was it like before, and just wanted to see what information was gleaned from that. And it was interesting to show that, you do see the annual cycle of wet and dry, and you do see the bottom of this kind of green band. It rarely gets to the bottom, which means it didn't dry out most of the time, historically. What I wanted to point out here as well is I also superimposed the Cork 2, which is our control structure, on the bottom of that. And I've graphed our 2020 data set and our current year data set, 2021. The takeaway I want to kind of draw your attention to is where the 2020 lines are for Cork 2 versus the Lettuce Lake staff gauge. They both saw a significant decline last dry season, not unusual given the extreme dryness that we've had throughout the entire region and district. And, we hit new record lows for our Cork 2 structure. There's nothing else that, we could do operationally to prevent that. And then as the wet season restarted, we bounced around the very top of this blue band, which is our wet season range. And as we had some drier times last wet season. We're trying to hold that as high as we can and still provide the flood control level of service for the residents in the area. And what we did when the rains started to taper off and there was forecast for, a dry season, we transitioned the system to a dry season operations pretty early last year, in an effort to do everything we could do operationally to offset this right now. And so you can see that here, this orange line bounces around near the top of, actually above the range, the pink box, that's kind of our range. And we're able to hold that steady until we're still pretty high at this point in time. We're almost at record levels for our Cork 2 structure. I would just draw your eyes then to the slope of the line, the recession rate for the blue line at the Lettuce Lake structure, the one on top. And it parallels closely the recession rate from one last year. So, I just putting the information together, I thought it was an interesting story to tell and to share with the board, and just to highlight there's much more work to do. We've got more modeling, more survey, and investigation really to do to try and figure out what's going on out there. And I know there's some plans coming up we're continuing to work with them and help define what's going on here. But I found this to be an interesting story. So now's the portions where I'll kind of walk through the rest of the canal system. How are we doing versus our period of record? And this is, kind of gives you a snapshot of that conditions map. So I won't spend too much time on this, but the takeaways here is I wanted to highlight that we're receding above the 75th percentile. And I do have my eye on wet season. That's only a few weeks away. I don't want to start the system too high for that either. So we're trying to look and see how these recessions will then intersect with our wet season operations. So we've got that kind of game plan in mind already looking forward. Same story here at Cocohatchee Canal. We've got Coco 1 and Coco 3. We've got our annual recession happening, but again, we're trying to hold as much as we can. And these structures have been closed for quite some time, but great shape for end of April and getting ready for the wet season. Our Faka Union Canal, this one on the north side, FU5, we're able to hold that one steady, the very, very top of the range the whole time. But, as with everything else, evapotranspiration picks up and we can no longer hold. We don't have any more excess water, so you start to see those recessions. But you do have the rainfall we just got. You're able to bounce back up, and we're able to hold on to all that water, which is great. Henderson Creek Canal, similar story here. I won't dwell on it too long, but it's similar. We're paralleling that 75th percentile as we get closer to our wet season start. Moving east to the Picayune Strand Restoration Project, just like JJ mentioned, we also provide the operational support for these SERP projects. And I've updated these graphs a little bit to include the Faka Union pump station. That one wasn't there last time. Since it is going to be online and pumping this wet season, I want to go ahead and start tracking that. However, wherever the bottom hits and whenever that actually hits, that'll kind of define when we actually get to start pumping. And hopefully that's sooner rather than later. I'm really kind of excited to go out there and see the spreader basin fill up and see the restoration flows start to happen. So we've looked at surface water. Let's look underground a little bit. These are our groundwater trends. And I've added a couple new pictures to this slide just to kind of highlight the differences between last year and this year. On the right, I've got the same kind of conditions map. So this is a snapshot of all the groundwater wells in the region for the lower West Coast. And you're seeing a lot of reds and oranges, and that's indicating those are in their lower percentiles, which that was last year. You see very similar, if you look below that, you see a lot of oranges, but not as many reds. So it's Water Conservation Month. There was a water conservation advisory put out just, for public information to encourage everyone to save as much water as possible to help slow these recessions down until the rainy time starts. But for Collier County and for the basin in general, I want to look here on the left. And, those water levels for these particular wells are looking fairly good. We've only got 2 that are in the low concern, that kind of the warning indicator. The rest of them are in the green, and they might be closer. Some of them around the 50th percentile, maybe a little bit lower, but still in good shape for this time of year. So it's approached the end of dry season. So looking forward, it's been dry. This is the first time it's changed to see a wetter than normal period. So our May long-term forecasts are 30 days. They're indicating above average rainfall. Same thing for the wet season from June all the way to October. These things fluctuate constantly, so I don't put too much stock in them, but the trend has changed. It's a planning tool that we use, to help guide operations. So that's looking forward. And then just one last thing to mention here. This is kind of the drought indicator. The stark difference between last year and this year. The darker oranges on the left slide, on the left picture, indicate that severe drought. there, and the one on the right, that's the one from last week. You don't have the severe drought. You do have some moderate dryness in the area and region. A lot of that may be gone the next time one of these comes out, since we've had so much rainfall, but it's a stark contrast from where we were last year, which is a good story for the very end of the year. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Brad, for your report. Are there any board questions for Brad? Brad, I'm not seeing any questions for you at this time. Let's see about public comment. Erin, is there any public comment on the water conditions report?
I have no public comment at this time, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you, Brad, for your excellent report. Appreciate it. Okay, we'll now move to the staff reports, our Basin Administrators report. Lisa?
Good afternoon and happy Earth Day. I hope everybody after the meeting is over gets to get outside and do something special and celebrate Earth Day. So the one thing I just want to talk about and make everybody aware of, especially our new board members, we are getting ready for our annual hurricane exercise. Every year we call it, every year it's called Hurricane Freddy, which Freddy is our mascot. But our team over in West Palm Beach does a great job of challenging everybody. Everybody has a hurricane response role, is involved. Jesus, JJ, they've got special orders, and we are challenged in this 24-hour period. We get interjects that change the kind of the rules of engagement, if you will. And so it's great. Your entire basin staff is fully exercised. So we are ready to provide a wonderful level of service and just brush off the dust off of our standing operating procedures. So just want to let you know that that's coming up. We do have our eye on hurricane season, and we are getting ready to respond.
So it's like war games?
Like what? Like war games? Is that what you're?
War games.
Some years we kind of feel that way. Jesus is shaking his head. I mean, it is fun. It's challenging, and I will say, every year that I've participated in my years with the district, we've never walked away and had 0 on our after action report. We always have something that we're learning that because of the interject or the situation that was brought to us for that particular exercise, something we maybe didn't have brushed off, weren't as polished up as we would have liked to have been. So it's a great exercise. Excellent. Any questions? Anything that you'd like? We're going to be working over the next 6 weeks. We're firming up your tentative fiscal 22 budget, and we'll be bringing that to you for your tentative millage and tentative budget at your July meeting. If you have any questions or any topics that you'd like to have brought to you at that time, just let me know.
Great. Thank you, Lisa. Are there any questions for Lisa? Super. Thank you so much for your report. Okay, the monthly financial report. Candy Heater.
Thank you, Madam Chair and board members, members of the public. The monthly financial report that I'm reporting on today for the Big Cypress Basin financials is through the month of February. And currently, you all have collected 95% of your revenues. Through the month of February, that is 41% of the year completed, and you've collected 95% of your revenues. So you are well ahead of trend on your ad valorem collections. You've collected $10.3 million out of 10.9. So there's about $600,000 remaining to collect. It's at 94.5%. I'd also like to bring to your attention that you have received additional revenues, FEMA funding from Hurricane Irma in the amount of $210,917. That it has been already deposited into the Big Cypress Basin account. And the investment earnings are behind slightly according to last year's investment earnings collections. And that's, as we all know, because of the market, et cetera. But you're still at about $27,000 of collections. There was some changes made at the last audit and finance committee meeting where our treasurer is going to invest some more funding into the bonds that are very secure. And that should realize some more investment earnings for the Big Cypress Basin. So we'll be able to analyze that. On your expenditure side, so your uses side, you have expended $2.9 million out of $21 million budget. You've got over $7 million encumbered and about $11 million available. Your available budget does include your $2 million emergency reserve, so you should always see that $2 million available unless we have an emergency and need to tap into that reserve. And then you've got, salaries that still need to be paid through the month of September. So by looking and analyzing your financial staff, looking at your financials, you are in good shape. And that concludes my report.
Thank you so much, Candy. Are there questions from the board for Ms. Heater? I don't see any questions for you, Candy, but boy, that's good news that 95% of our money has been collected and that we're ahead of trend. Thank you for that excellent report. That's really good news.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, the next item coming up is the general public comment for this part of the meeting when the public has another opportunity to speak. Erin, are there any members of the public who wish to speak to the board?
I have no public comment for you today, Madam Chair.
Okay, we have no additional public comments, so we'll go to the final board comment. If there are any board members who would like to speak, please do so. Well, I have a few things if none of the other board members have anything to say. First of all, I wanted to provide you an update on the legislation involving the expansion of the Big Cypress Basin. I don't know if you had a chance to watch the committee sessions on the Florida channel, but Senator Rodriguez and Representative Bontana postponed their legislation that would have expanded the Big Cypress Basin. I don't anticipate this legislation will be considered this year since the legislative session ends next week on April 30th. The district, in regards to assisting Lee County, understands that there's some flooding issues. And so we've pledged to work with Lee County, Bonita Springs, and Estero, and the community to find solutions. And if those solutions involve the Big Cypress Basin, then the district will also engage with this board and Collier County to address those issues. So I wanted to give you that update. Also, if you're driving in the area and you go by Freedom Park, I'd like to suggest that board members, if you have a few minutes, that you stop at Freedom Park and walk around, because we have a regional partnership project that's in progress right now at Freedom Park that's expanding the filter marsh to treat the stormwater rolling off of Goodlet Frank Road. And I visited the site with the Collier County Commissioner Chair Penny Taylor, and also hosted a group of developers in the area to take a look at the filter marsh that's there at Freedom Park. For example, the ditch that was there was about 8 feet wide, and we're expanding it to, the county's expanding it in our partnership project to over 30 feet wide. So the amount of stormwater coming off of the roadway that can be treated and cleaned before it goes into the Gordon River is going to increase exponentially. Plus, it provides a beautiful park for our community. So, treating stormwater can be a beautiful park. And so that was the message. We can treat it. Now, there's another project similar in the area, but I don't know if the Conservancy of Southwest Florida is open yet to the public. But a large amount of stormwater flows off of the Coastland Mall parking lot and also Goodlet Road. And there's a small ditch between the zoo parking lot and the Conservancy property. Well, that captures the stormwater. And another one of the Basin's regional partnership projects is going to expand that filter marsh and increase the plantings there. So those two areas are in close proximity to one another. And we're going to increase the amount of stormwater that can be cleaned before entering the Gordon River and eventually Naples Bay. So I'm very excited about both those projects. Commissioner Taylor was also, very interested to see how that was coming along and to use it as an example for things that we can maybe suggest, or at least maybe some of the members of the development community will consider as they build and develop new communities. So that was really exciting, and it only take a few minutes if you're driving by just to stop and walk around. So I just wanted to share that with you. Also, I wanted to thank the staff for these meetings. This is a hybrid meeting that is very, very difficult in terms of all of the moving parts. And it wouldn't be possible without the leadership of Lisa Keeler. And I wanted to give you a shout out today, Lisa, for your outstanding work on a day-to-day basis for the Basin, but also when it comes down to pulling all these pieces together for these meetings. And I really wanted to thank you for all your effort.
Well, thank you. As you know, the staff makes it look easy. But there's a lot of work that's going on here in the control room at Collier County, as well as in West Palm Beach. So we have a lot of staff supporting us today. So thank you, everyone.
And this is twice in a row. And the fact that you allow the board members, whether they're here in person or on Zoom, to raise their hand and to show up on the monitor for me makes my job easy. So I really want to thank you for everything that you've done to make this possible. And hopefully in the future, we'll bring the public back in person, but I think they like participating on Zoom anyway. So we'll see how that goes. Are there any other members of the board who would like to speak? Thank you to the board members. It's another outstanding meeting, and I really appreciate all that you're doing for our community. Thank you all very much. If not, we're adjourned.